Good. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this online presentation, which is about the workplace of the future, and it's reimagining what that workplace of the future might look like. This is something that I'm passionate about and have been working in this area for quite a long time. And as a result of COVID-19, people are making some interesting decisions about what their future workplace might look like. So in the next 45 minutes, I want to share some ideas, but also give you the chance to share your ideas about what that workplace might look like for you. So if you're a leader, a manager, an HR professional, and you're looking at what that future workplace might look like, let's take the time now to share some ideas. And it's not we won't talk about everything about the workplace of the future, but I'll share with you some important things. Some people have been here at my presentations before. If you haven't, my 3 broad rules of engagement. I want to give you things to think about. So do whatever you can to minimize interruptions and distractions in the time that we've got together. I also want you to be a bit playful here. So this is live for the people who are here live. If you're watching the recording, you'll miss out some of the interactive bits, but if you're here live, then go all in. You can use the chat room to ask questions. You'll have an opportunity to chat with other people here as well. I'll ask you questions, and we've got a couple of little exercises as we go. So the more you engage, the more value you'll get out of it, and the more value that the rest of the room will get out of it as well. Ultimately, I want you to get some things that you can take away and put into action and use immediately, regardless of what role you're in and regardless of where your workplace is at the moment. A tiny bit about me. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about myself. If you want to find out more about me, you can go to gihanperera.com and find out all about me. I'm a business futurist, and I've been working in this area as a futurist for the last decade, and work with lots of organizations around Australia and globally, especially in the last year. But I want to make the point that many leadership teams are facing the same challenges, and it doesn't matter whether you're a large multinational or a small business. It doesn't matter whether you're a government or a not-for-profit or a corporate. It doesn't matter whether you at what level you have for leadership responsibility in your organization. Many of the challenges, especially that we're facing now about the workplace, we're all facing them. This is something that I've been passionate about for a long time. So I've kind of been championing this idea that the office doesn't have to be the standard workplace for knowledge workers. I've been championing this idea for about 20 years now. This was about 15 years ago. I've had the luxury of being able to work away from an office, sometimes in the office, sometimes away from an office for a long time. And about 15 years ago, this was literally 2006, it was quite a novel idea, and so novel, in fact, that I was working at an outdoor cafe on my laptop, and this local journalist was walking by, and he took a photograph, wrote up a little article about me because it was such a new idea at the time. It's not now, and 2020 has made that mainstream, but for a long time it was just something that only a few people did. And then about 10 years ago, my friend Chris Pudney and I wrote a book called Out of Office, and it was all about how employees, it was written for employees, how employees could encourage their bosses and persuade them that they could work away from the office, either part-time or full-time. And we actually, last year, we thought about revising that book and maybe even writing another one called Talent Everywhere for the leaders and managers side of it. And we didn't do that, but I've run a lot of presentations and written a lot of articles about that. But again, the point is, this has been around for a while. It just hasn't been mainstream until 2020. So before we get into today's topic and my content, I actually want to ask you, and this is the first chance for you to share in the chat room, what, in terms of your workplace, so for you personally, what has been the biggest benefit or the biggest positive change to your workplace in the last year? And it can be anything, it can be big or small, and it doesn't have to be it doesn't mean that your workplace now is better, but what one thing could be better or has been better. So I'm going to give you the chance to answer in the chat room, and I'll read out some of the responses as they come in. You'll see in the chat you can respond to everyone, or you can respond just to me, but I'd rather that you respond to everyone. Yeah, Nicole says working from home on a wider scale. Yeah, flexibility to work from home from Meredith. For me, it's this, by the way, it's this that I've been doing for 12 years now, online presentations. But again, that hasn't been mainstream, but suddenly that's become mainstream, and I've been able to do these from home. Attending meetings by video conference, yep. Trying out new ways of working, commute time, Teams meetings, yeah, and training, more access to everyone, from Andrea. Live online workshops, yeah. Okay, great. See lots of answers coming in. I can't read them all out now. Access to others as group, normalizing working from home, cost reduction. Yes, a Bobby in the Philippines. So I spoke at a Philippines conference last year, again from home. Perceived barriers, yeah, interesting, and better flexibility. And greater scope to work with clients internationally. Yeah, that's right. And I had, until last year, deliberately limited the marketing that I was doing for international work. And now that the world literally is at my doorstep or within my doorstep, I'm now promoting more widely again. Yeah, inclusivity for working parents. Fantastic. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing your responses there. Let's talk about what I mean by when we're talking about reimagining the workplace. What does it mean? So, what kind of workplaces are we looking at? And I think there's quite a broad scope to this, and I want to talk about this at 4 levels. And we're only going to look at level 2 today because that's the one that's top of mind for many people right now, many leaders, many organizations. So, level 1 is a fixed workplace. This is where everybody comes into the office, they work together, they roughly the same hours, but they're there physically in person all together throughout the week. The next version is a hybrid workplace, and very broadly, a hybrid workplace or a hybrid team is where your team members have more than one workplace. So they're working in different places, and it may not be full-time working from home and full-time in the office. It may be a mix of them, and it may even be like in Australia, we've been very lucky with the way that we've managed the pandemic. So it may be that people are working from co-working spaces or cafes or out in the park, but they've got more than one standard workplace. So, the old days where you could work from home sometimes because you needed to wait for a tradie or because you had a sick kid at home, and that was the exception rather than the rule. In the future, the hybrid team or the hybrid workplace is going to be the norm. The next level up from that is what I call a distributed team or distributed workplace, where you've got people who might never come into the office. They don't have to live within commute distance of your office. So they may be in, if you've got a city office, you might have some staff who are regional or international and in different time zones. And that's why I've said that the difference here is that people might actually be working at different times. So you can't necessarily bring everyone together at the same time because they might be scattered across different time zones around the world. And the next level up from that, and we're a little bit away from that, although a few organizations are doing this, is the fluid team or the fluid workplace, where now the actual composition of your team changes from time to time and from project to project. So what happens is you're working on a project, you bring together the best people in the world. Literally, you've got access to the best people in the world. They come together for that project, they do the project successfully, and then they disband. There might be a core group of people that stays there, but really, instead of you having a job with one company or one organization, you could be working in different projects for different clients in different teams. Okay, so there's a long way to go before we go there yet, and before we accept that as mainstream. But today, I want to talk about the idea of this hybrid workplace, because many organizations are looking at this now as our reality, as we're easing the restrictions around the pandemic. What does that mean for our workplace? So let me share with you a little bit of information first before we get into the interactive part of this. So during the pandemic, so in July last year, Harvard did some research, and they said almost half of managers and leaders say that they're uncomfortable with managing people that they can't see. And this was in the middle of the pandemic, particularly when people were fully locked down and everybody, knowledge workers, were working from home. And there were two sides to this. So the managers said two things. And one is they said, I don't know how to manage and coordinate and influence people when I can't see them. And the other side of it was that they can't do their work effectively because they don't know how to perform well. They're actually not skilled at using some of the collaboration tools like Zoom and Teams and online bulletin boards, and they won't be motivated. So these are the perceptions, not necessarily reality, but these are some of the perceptions. Another piece of research, and I'm sharing this one pre-pandemic to make the point that even before the pandemic, there's been this push from employees to say, we want to have flexibility about when and where we work. And bosses and managers and HR were saying, yeah, we get that. It's just not a priority for us just yet. And then suddenly 2020 made that a necessity and it became a priority. Here's some research that was done by PwC recently, a couple of months ago. And in fact, I'm going to ask you to guess what the research said. So they asked employees and employers about this hybrid workplace. And they said some percentage of employees want to work from home at least 3 days a week. And some percentage of employers wanted their teams in the office at least 3 days a week. I'm going to ask you to guess. I'm going to ask you in the chat room, can you write down what you think those percentages were? So you might write down 10 and 90 or 80, 20, whatever it is. And let's see what we're guessing here. So 80 and 80. Yeah. This was done very recently, by the way. So this was the last few months, PwC published this. 45 and 35, 60 and 40, 60 and 80, 70, 70, 80, 20. Jody, great to see you here. 60, 50, 40, 80, 60, 80. Okay, so let me share the actual results with you. And the numbers don't really matter here, but the percentages were as follows, right? So most employees wanted to work from home at least 3 days a week, but most bosses wanted their employees in the office at least 3 days a week. Now, the numbers don't matter, except that there's a conflict there and there's this tension there that as a result of the pandemic, employees are saying, we actually kind of like this flexibility, and bosses are trying to drag them back into the office sooner rather than later because the bosses feel, rightly or wrongly, that they don't know and they can't lead a team if the team is not in the office and present all the time. So there's a little bit of tension there. Now, not every organization is trying to get their people back into the office. One of them, Siemens, and disclosure, they're a client of mine, in the middle of the pandemic, they announced that all around the world, for Siemens staff in 44 countries, 150,000 people, any office workers, people who could work in an office, can now work from anywhere 2 to 3 days a week, in discussion with their boss and their manager and the rest of their team, but they were allowed to work 2 to 3 days a week away from the office. Mostly that meant working from home, but it did mean that they could work from anywhere. Because the CEO of Siemens said at the time, we trust our people to get the job done. And it doesn't matter when and why, where and how they work, because we trust that as long as we make their goals clear, that we have smart, talented people who can achieve those goals. And Microsoft has been doing this for a long time. So Microsoft, before the pandemic, would allow their team members to work from co-working spaces. So you could go to the main head office in Seattle and work there, but you could also work in a co-working space. And Microsoft not only allowed it and not only encouraged it, but they would pay for membership of co-working spaces for their employees who want to work in those spaces. So we've got co-working hubs in most of our major cities around Australia, and it's grown around the world as well. In the past, it was mostly for people who were either individual entrepreneurs or small startup companies who didn't want to rent expensive office space. They would buy membership of a co-working space and they would use that. But now in the future, this is going to become more mainstream, because the reason Microsoft did it was they felt that if Microsoft employees were working in these co-working hubs, they would be mingling and interacting and engaging with non-Microsoft people, maybe even customers using Microsoft devices, or talking to people from different industries and different businesses, and that would actually increase their creativity and innovation when they went back and they started collaborating with the rest of their team. So again, as I'm saying, this is not necessarily new. It might just be new for you, but there is a path already for us. But there's some challenges around that as well. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, in fact, since we're talking about challenges, I'm going to ask you, what's your biggest challenge with this idea of a hybrid workplace? And don't type this in the chat room. We're going to do it a little bit more publicly so everybody can see the answers. And you might also want to upvote some of the answers. So the way that this works is I'm going to run this online poll where you can type in. So it's not a poll where you choose A, B, C, D, or E. You can type in the answer to the question. So there are three ways that you can get to this. One is you can go to typing into your web browser askgihan.com. The other way is I've just pasted that in the chat, so you can just click the link in the chat if you want to. And the third way to get to it is if you hold up your camera and hold up your phone, open the camera app. I'm not sure whether you know that modern iPhones and Android phones, the camera app recognizes QR codes. So if you hold up your camera app to the QR code there, it will ask you whether you want to go to this link that I've set up for you. Okay, so do that now, and it'll just ask you to type in a question. Let me bring that up for you. So if you haven't got askgihan.com, it's there in the chat. And if you want the QR code, let me just bring that up for you here as well. Okay, we're using a tool called Slido. So the other way of doing it is just to go to slido.com and type in work 2021. But why would you? You've got quicker ways of doing it. So when you get there, it will give you the chance to ask a question. Okay, and remember the question is, what's your biggest challenge with a hybrid workplace? So actually I want an answer rather than a question, and it could be something like, so when I've done this with groups before, they say things like, how do I get people to collaborate when they're not all in the same space together? Work with a professional service firm, and they said, how can we do mentoring when our people aren't in the office? Another question that I've had is how do you build a team culture when your people aren't all together in the same place? Okay, so let me just see. I haven't seen any come through yet, but yeah. So if you're typing in the chat, then don't do that. If you type it go to Slido instead. Yeah, excellent. So I'm seeing some results coming through now, and you can see them here. By the way, if you see somebody's comment that you like, then the way to steal it or to say that you like it as well, you can also press the thumbs up, the like button, and it goes higher up in the list. We don't have to do that. You can have your own one as well. Okay, so what have we got? Protecting a culture and engagement, meeting fatigue, get clients to embrace the fact that live online learning can be as effective. How do you build trust? Switching off is a big one. Yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah, some roles are easy to do out of office. Yep. Great. I'll give you a little bit more time in case there are other people who want to type some in. Okay, I think we've seen enough. So it's great to see that there's such a diversity of responses here. So we'll come back to these later. So we'll come back to these questions a little bit later. You can keep continuing to, if you want to add your questions to the list, then you're welcome to do that, or your comments to the list, you're welcome to do that. I want to talk about something else, and I want to do a little bit of an exercise with you here, where I get to ask you the questions. Okay, so I ask you a question here, but this is a little bit of an exercise around learning. And it's an exercise around learning, which has become very real for me in the last couple of months. And it's become real because I've just started teaching my 16-year-old niece how to drive. So I don't know whether you've ever had the opportunity to teach a young person to get behind heavy machinery and learn how to navigate effectively using our road system. But if you haven't, it's quite an interesting experience, quite an interesting opportunity. And my niece Abby, who's just got her L plates, she asked me whether I could teach her how to drive. So that's a picture of her looking a little bit nervous. We don't take her family dog, in the car with us, by the way, for driving lessons. But she asked me whether I could teach her how to drive. And I've done this once before, about 5 years ago with my stepdaughter, who confusingly her name's Abby as well. And it's quite interesting because when you start teaching somebody something that's been so natural and automatic for you and you've become unconsciously competent in it, and you have to go back to basics to teach somebody who's starting right from scratch. It's quite a challenge. So what we're going to do is you can help me teach Abby how to drive. And what I want to do is go through some scenarios for you. And I've got 4 scenarios, and I'll show you how they relate to our workplace of the future. But there's 4 scenarios around driving. So 3 of them have actually happened in the last 5. Abby's had 5 hours behind the wheel. So in those 5 lessons, these 3 scenarios have come up. And the 4th one will come up in the future. It's a bit too advanced for Abby at the moment, but this 4th one will come up. So what I'm going to ask you to do, so what I will do is map out these scenarios for you and ask for your input into, so this is what I'll tell you what Abby did, and I'll ask for your input into, what would an experienced, competent driver be teaching Abby about, what did she do wrong, or what does she need to learn from this. All right, I hope you're up for this. This is not a test on the road rules, by the way. It's just some exercises here. All right, so let's see how we go. Okay, so this first one, this happened in, I think, a 2nd lesson, or the first time she actually went out on a, reasonably major road. So the first couple of times we just did a little exercise in a car park, but this was her first opportunity going out on a real road. And the scenario was this. So for international people, Australians, we drive on the left-hand side of the road. We're supposed to. And so this is Abby's car, so this is it's black, so Abby's car will always be black because that's the colour of my car. So Abs is ready and she has a turn here. There's no traffic coming this way, but there is another car here. And this car has signalled to turn right out of this intersection into the main road. And so what Abby did was she saw the other car, she came up here and she stopped here to give way to that other car, even though she had right of way, but she thought that she didn't. Okay, she thought that she had to give way to the right because when she was reading and learning, studying for a test, she knew that give way to the right is a really important rule. She didn't quite think, like in the heat of the moment, in this situation, that she has right of way because she's on the continuing road. So, ladies and gentlemen, can I ask you for your advice in what we should be telling Abby to get past this and to learn that she has right of way, and if it's safe she can turn right. Okay, in the chat room, what would you tell Abby? Or what would a competent driver do? Okay, so it's not so much about me teaching, like what do you need Abby to do to learn that. What is the answer here? All right. Okay, giving you a chance to type in. You have right of way, so this is Nicole. You have right of way. They're waiting for you to turn right first. Yeah, so it's about right of way. Okay, so this is a simple one. So let me do that one quickly. So this is all about information. Right? It's just that Abby didn't know the rule. That's all it was. It's just a simple question of once she knows the rule, then she knows exactly how to manage in that situation. When you come to terminating road, you give way. Yes, another right-of-way still needs to be, or the right-of-way still needs to be aware of surroundings. Yes, Jody, and I know you've probably had the chance of, what is it now, 3 kids that you've taught to drive. Okay, so next situation. All right, you guys doing all right for the moment? Okay, roundabouts. So where Abby lives, there's quite a few roundabouts, and I love roundabouts. I think they're a very good traffic control measure. So we've been practicing going around roundabouts. So we had this situation here. Abby's coming up to a roundabout. There's nobody else in the roundabout. It's all really clear. And I want her to go straight through the roundabout. So exit. Take the second exit, as Google would tell me. So Abby's okay at that. Like she knows that when she gets past this point here, she should indicate left to say that she's now about to exit the roundabout. And then she exits the roundabout. She does it pretty well, except that she's kind of still at this point where she's holding onto the steering wheel. She knows she has to indicate to turn left, but it's so difficult for her to manipulate the steering wheel and the indicators at the same time. So she kind of fumbles a little bit around that. So what would an experienced, competent driver do? Anyone? So what's Abby's challenge at the moment with this situation? Yeah, he's trusting. Yeah, part of his trust is about practice. Anne says practice. And look, Anne, I think that that's exactly right. So this is just it's simply a question of skill. Okay, Abby knows what to do. She knows the rules. She knows what she has to do, but it's simply lots of practice to get the skill so you can master that skill. All right, the next one. So again, this is a really common situation on our roads. So Abby's driving along, and there's a road which narrows to become one lane. So it starts off as a 2-lane road and it narrows to become one lane. So she's driving in the left lane like a good learner driver will do, so there's no stress on her. And there's another car in the right lane that she needs to, and the two cars are going to merge. Now she knows that if this blue car is far enough behind, no problem. She just goes straight on, still indicates, but she goes straight on. She doesn't really need to change anything. She also knows that if she's back here and this blue car's way ahead, same thing. She doesn't need to really change anything, just because there's not going to be any conflict at all. The real challenge comes when the cars are relatively close to each other. Okay, so it's close by there or close by there. And she's saying, what do you do? Like, what am I supposed to do? So what's the answer to this, by the way? What's the answer to this one? Okay, so Rinja says, give yourself time. That might have been for the previous question, not sure. Anyone else? What's the real answer? The car crossing the broken line gives way. Yeah. Interesting. Yep. Communication. Merge politely, be safe, let the other car go. So look, it's really interesting, right? Like, and all these answers are correct, right? Like, and things like polite and be safe and let the other car go. So sometimes you let the other car go. Sometimes you know that you've got room to go before the other car and so on. Keep the traffic flowing, so you merge like a zip when there's lots of cars. Consider the speed of the other car. So it's really interesting because I think all of these answers are right, and they're all come down to a judgment call. Okay, there's no 100% right answer that I can tell Abby, this is the rule to follow every time. Sometimes you're going to make a judgment call that is safe to go. Sometimes you're going to make a judgment call that you need to hold back. And with a lot of experience, it's not like the skill of pressing the indicator at the same time as you're turning the wheel. It's not like you'd learn to do that every time. You have to sometimes make a different judgment call each time. Okay, all right. All right, one more. This is one that hasn't come up yet, but will soon, because there's an area near Abby's house that this situation will occur, and it's the sort of thing that in her exam is quite likely that if their examiner wants to be tough, they might have this situation. Okay, so this is a two-way road, quite a main road, and Abby's coming into the intersection from here. There's a stop sign here, so she has to stop at the line. And she has to turn right. So she has to turn right across traffic. So there's traffic coming from this side, there's traffic coming from this side, and also on this side there's some parked cars which kind of block her vision of this traffic coming this way. So it's a little bit of a hill here, so there's parked cars on this side as well, and it's very difficult when she's at the legally, if she stops behind that white line, it's difficult for even her to see the cars coming over the crest of the hill from the left-hand side, from the far lane which she's trying to turn into, and she can hardly see the cars coming in from the left-hand side that she needs to give way to. So, what do you do? What would an experienced, competent driver do in this situation? Any suggestions? So this is one that we haven't come up to yet, but she will. And it's something that we do come up to from time to time. Okay. Be patient, evaluate the safest way, stop in the white line, then pull forward enough to see in both directions. As she answered, that would be my advice to her. So you stop, so you've done the right thing legally, and then you kind of nudge forward and keep doing that until you can see. Stop behind the line for 3 seconds, check both ways, and if it seems clear, gradually move forward. Yep, that's Nicole saying the same thing. Jodie's saying stop and look. Simone says nudge out slowly. Cynthia says, pull your nose out slowly. Yeah, right. Okay, so this is so we're all saying the same thing. I think we're all safe drivers. So I think Abby's in safe hands here. So I reckon the right thing to do, if you get this in the exam, is exactly what you've said. You come up to the stop sign, you stop, and then you tell the examiner, I can't see, so I'm going to nudge forward, just so that they don't think that you're going out into traffic, and you nudge until you can see. Now, in real life, outside the exam conditions, there are a couple of other things you could do. One is, of course, you say, I'm not going to turn right, I'm going to turn left, because that's easier. I only have to look for traffic on one side. Or I think what many of us would do is we'd say, we're not going to go to that intersection, we'll find another way around. Okay, and so this comes down to, it's not so much a judgment call, but I reckon the more you drive, you actually build wisdom. You become a wise driver, and you know what situations to avoid, so you don't have to make those judgment calls, you don't have to use your skill, and you don't have to use the information that's available to you. Okay, so I reckon when we're looking at, if we transfer this now back to what our workplace of the future is going to look like, many of the challenges that we're facing, especially as leaders and managers and in HR, come down to one of these four things. Anytime there's a challenge, ask yourself, is it a challenge? Because, by the way, this applies to you. It could be a challenge for you, could be a challenge for somebody in your team. Is it a problem with the information that they have, so that they just need to know more information? And sometimes that's all it is. So is it that they know that they need to know that when you turn on, let's say, when you start a Teams meeting, you need to press this button to turn on your microphone so you're not on mute? Could be as simple as that. Is it a skill thing? That I know I need to do it, but I just forget to do it when I start speaking. So I just need more and more practice. I need to get the right skill. Is it a judgment call? Like, should I turn my microphone on now and speak? Sometimes you should, because you're being called on. Sometimes you should, even if you haven't been called on. Sometimes it's okay to interrupt people. Sometimes it's not. It's a judgment call. And sometimes it's a question around wisdom. Is this meeting even required? Okay, so it's going to big picture. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is let's have a chat with the people in the room. So let me go back to some of the questions that came up. Now, by the way, if you don't like the question that's on the screen here, so you can do one of two things. So I'm going to get you to break into little groups, and there'll be groups of about 3 or 4 people in each group. And rather than me answer your questions, I'm going to give you the chance to answer each other's questions. So the way I'm going to ask you to do this is like this. So let me just explain this to you. Think about a challenge that you're having with a hybrid workplace. It might actually be something that you really are having a challenge with and you want to talk about that, or you could borrow somebody else's question or comment. You can see the top ones here on the screen there. It doesn't matter which one. And I want you to tap into the wisdom of the group, the rest of the group. So if you're in a group of 4 people, what you're going to do at the end of this is you're going to share a challenge, and at the end of it, you're going to have 6 suggestions for how you can deal with that challenge. Here's how it's going to work. And I'd like you to follow this process, please. And if you get extra time, then have a chat among yourselves and go into a longer discussion. But it's better if you make sure that you get at least 3 to 6 suggestions. So if you start and you've got I'm going to pick Jody because that's Jody's somebody I know who lives in Perth as well. So Jody, whatever your challenge is, I don't really mind. But so Jody says, my challenge is X. And then go around the room and the other 3 people in the group will say, you could suggestion 1, or you could suggestion 2. Okay, so 2 suggestions from that person's perspective of something that Jody could do. Now that may be really spot on for Jody, and she goes, I never thought of that, fantastic idea. It may be completely irrelevant. Regardless of which one it is, Jody's response, apart from writing it down, is to say thank you and move on to the next one. Okay, now if you haven't got 2 suggestions for Jody and you've just got 1, then just give her 1. If you've got none, then say pass, that's okay. But I reckon whatever challenge comes up, you've got something. Without finding out more context about the situation that someone's in, I reckon you've got a suggestion for them. And some of these will be real diamonds. Some of them won't be relevant, but that's okay. Some of them will be real diamonds. Okay, and then you go to the next person in the room. Has everyone got that? Any questions about how this is going to work before I put you into groups? And all right, folks, so this thing around this little exercise that I did with Abby, I think is really crucial because everything that we're talking about today and the challenges that you have, many of them are around trust. I'm not saying everything is around trust, but many of them are around trust. And trust happens at different levels. Sometimes, like I don't trust Abby that she knows every road rule perfectly. Sometimes it's that I know that she hasn't yet done enough practice to get the right skill. Sometimes I know that she has the skill, but there's situations where she doesn't know how to make the right judgment call. And sometimes, and this wisdom is only going to start happening when she gets her license and she gets out on the road and has to make decisions for herself. Anne Rolfe, who's here today, is going to be running a session. Anne is Australia's, I keep saying this, Anne is Australia's world-class leading expert in mentoring. So if you need any help around mentoring in your organization, Anne's a person to talk to. And Anne is running a webinar next week, coincidentally, also about trust. It's about trust in mentoring. And this trust thing is such an important part of looking at building a strong team culture for the future. Let me just, before we finish off, share with you a story around one company that's been really well known for the way that they trust their employees. And this company is Nordstrom. So Nordstrom's a high-end retail store in the US. Some people may know it. And Nordstrom is famous for its customer service. So they have this kind of belief that the customer's always right. And for example, if you buy something from Nordstrom, return it, then they will just give you your money back. They don't need a receipt or anything like that. This famous story about a customer who returned a set of car tires to Nordstrom and said, I paid this much. Can I have a refund? And the Nordstrom customer service rep took the tires back, gave him the refund, and Nordstrom doesn't sell tires. But they figured, then the service rep figured, we will get more money from the lifetime value of having them as a customer than the money that we just lost on this transaction. Now, this is not about customer service. This is about that philosophy of trust, because what happens with Nordstrom is they invest a lot in recruiting the right people, and then when they turn up on their first day at work, they give them a little card, and on the card it has Nordstroms Rules, and it goes like this: use your best judgment in all situations, rule number 1, and then there are no other rules. Okay, and now look, if you're in HR and you're just cringing at the fact that you can get away with that, they absolutely do everything they have to do to be compliant from an HR perspective. But broadly speaking, this is their guiding principle. We trust you to use your best judgment. And I reckon a really good way for us moving forward, especially in this really chaotic, uncertain time, when we're thinking about what our future workplace is going to look like, is to have this phrase in mind, to go, I trust your judgment. I trust your judgment. Okay, so if you're a manager, if you're an HR, if you have some sort of leadership role and somebody comes to you for help, just imagine asking this in your head. Can you say to this person, I trust your judgment? Now, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you know that they don't have the right information. So they need the information. Sometimes they don't have the right skills. And sometimes they don't have the judgment, good judgment or wisdom. So sometimes you can't. But quite often you can. And if you can't, then what can you do to give them the right information, to build their skills, or to build their judgment? So I've kind of had this philosophy working with my fantastic business manager, Emma. So Em's brilliant. She's really good. And I've said, Emma can come and ask me anything. But every time you ask me something, in my head, I'm thinking, can I say, Emma, I trust your judgment? And anytime I can, I will. And if I can't, then what do we need to do together so I can get to the point that next time I'll be able to say, I trust your judgment? I reckon this is a really good guiding principle for all of us in leadership, management, HR positions to think about if we're building up our team, especially a team that we won't be able to see full time all the time now, what can we do to get to the point where we can say, I trust your judgment? Doesn't mean you don't help them if they absolutely need your help, but what can we do to build to the point where we can say, I trust your judgment? Okay, so if you want to work with me, I do a lot of work in this area. I've got a keynote presentation about reimagining the workplace. I've got a longer version of this masterclass for anyone who's interested in if you're interested in taking this further, I've got a masterclass around that, around reimagining the workplace, and especially this workplace of the future. If you're interested in strategic planning, I work with senior leadership teams looking at their future strategy around the workplace of the future, as well as a leadership program, which is kind of a membership program for you and your team around the workplace of the future. So if you're interested in that, get in touch. I'd love to have a chat with you about how we can work together. I want to end by saying, don't wait for everything to be perfect. There's so much change and uncertainty happening at the moment. So you can't wait for your ducks to all be lined up in a row and be ready to take action. Start before you're ready, because the world won't wait for you. Thank you everyone for coming along. Thank you for taking part. Thank you for engaging with me and with each other as well. And I hope you got some value from that. And I hope to see you at a future program. So in the meantime, stay safe and healthy, and I'll see you in the future. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.